G'day mate, 40 here. So I saw that Cumulus Radio has told its hosts that they're unable to deny the legitimacy of the election at risk of getting fired. So this seems pretty heavy-handed. Maybe talk radio isn't the freewheeling individualist free speech zone that many people think. I don't have a problem with this. Like a friend says, oh, this just shows that they're trying to hide, or the elites are conspiring to try to hide this fraudulent election. I don't think so. I think it's completely legitimate, and even the responsible thing to do is to say that in the absence of evidence, you can't cast doubt on the legitimacy of the 2020 election, because as we saw with the MAGA crowd overrunning Capitol Hill, that there are some pretty extreme consequences to alleging that voter fraud determined the 2020 election. So I don't have a problem with this. And so I don't think this is any indication that they have something to hide. Like, if you're Cumulus Radio, okay, you've got something like 480 stations that you either own or you syndicate content to. You don't want to be pushing content that's factually untrue and that's toxic. Like, once people believe that the election is fraudulent, then they feel completely, they're going to be very likely to feel that there are no moral barriers to how they respond, right? When you convince people that voter fraud decided the 2020 election, then you're letting people off the hook. Like, once you allow people to feel like a victim, then victims don't feel any sense of moral responsibility. Like, victims don't have moral limits. Victims just do whatever they want to do when they want to do it. So, a lot of interesting questions come up as a result of, like, Trump being kicked off Twitter, Cumulus Radio now telling its hosts that they don't get to deny the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Parler essentially going offline. Allegations that all of Parler's user info was leaked. So I saw that. So I love the question, what's the gift in this situation? I think that's a really good question. Like, what's the gift? Because, right now everything looks really bleak from a conservative point of view. But surely there's a gift here somewhere, right? In this pile of manure, if we just keep digging, there's got to be a gift in here somewhere. So, in general, I think asking where's the gift in this situation, that's like a healthy way to go through life. Like, we get to choose what channel we're tuned into, and the gift is so we get to choose what channel we tune into in our brain. And if we choose to tune into the channel of aggrievement or anger or victimhood, that's going to produce a certain biochemical reaction. Luke inspired me to take nice long walks to the gym instead of driving. Excellent. Right? So another gift is that people may spend less time on social media. Trump supporters smeared, track their own feces, Capitol building. They're like monkeys. Yeah, it's disgusting. Some of the behaviors will be disgusting. Important issue coming out of all this mess with the MAGA riots on Capitol Hill is that we are going to be judged by our friends, and we are going to be judged by the company we keep, And we are going to be judged by our followers or fans. So, given that the human nature is essentially wild and dangerous and selfish, that's my perspective. From Christian language, you'd say that human nature is fallen. But given that, I think you really have to take a lot of care as a host, even with a tiny, tiny audience like I've got. You have to take a lot of care, try to make sure that you're not promoting or giving vent to antisocial, destructive tendencies. So Trump said nothing to explicitly encourage illegal behavior. He said absolutely nothing. But the upshot of continually questioning the legitimacy of the 2020 election, or denying the legitimacy of it, saying that the vote was rigged and fraudulent, the upshot of that has got to be an explosion of lawless behavior. Right? It'd be weird if you kept telling people that the 2020 election was fraudulent and that they never responded in an illegal way. Right? That'd be weird. So it's not just you have to avoid saying things that explicitly call for illegal behavior. You have to weigh the consequences of your words. So I've steadily become much more careful with the people I bring onto the show, with the type of conversation that I allow in the chat room, because there's a wildness in the human being. It's just always looking for opportunities to break out. And on the one hand, how could you be against questioning the election, right? We're supposed to question everything. Questioning's good, right? Isn't that part of the received wisdom? Questioning is good. On the other hand, if you're married, you really don't want to be questioning whether your spouse is faithful. The media behavior did much against many that the election was fraudulent. How so? What? I'm not aware of that, aside from the MAGA media claiming the election was fraudulent. I'm not aware of anything in the mainstream media that convinced people the election was fraudulent. Yeah, the primitive id of mankind. So you have to be careful. See, Trump said nothing about encouraging illegal behavior, and yet he's been kicked off Twitter and Facebook and about a dozen different social media agencies because of the consequences of his speech. And so maybe there's a lesson there. We don't have to just watch out for the explicit nature of our speech, but also what are the consequences of our speech? If our speech leaves people more likely to commit either illegal behavior or antisocial behavior, or just makes the conversation more toxic, then it's time to think a second time, failing to allow a two-sided conversation. Okay, that's presuming there's two sides. So far, I haven't seen that there's any evidence of the one side that claims that voter fraud was massive. Okay, here's the problem. Republican activists and conservative activists have lied for decades about there being massive evidence of massive voter fraud. And they lied about that. They were never able to make that case. So now they may have a case this time. I'm not aware of it. I don't see it yet. But when your side has been lying about something as a political tactic for decades, it's like the boy who cried wolf. Republicans have been the boy who cried wolf on voter fraud for decades, claiming routinely that there was massive amounts of voter fraud, but never feeling the necessity to make their case. Okay, squelching the Biden laptop story. That's interesting. I don't know how significant the Biden laptop story is, but it does appear from what I've seen to be more significant than the media, mainstream media has played it. So yeah, there's no doubt that news media is covering the MAGA riots completely differently from the way they covered the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots. So yeah, the media is definitely tilted to the left. So people react badly against a tilted playing field, right? But also much of the reacting badly is related to the messages that people are receiving. Like once you tell people that they're a victim, then they become wild, right? No, it's not that easy. You increase the odds of them becoming wild, right? You start removing moral barriers to becoming wild. Are you concerned that blood sports will be declared domestic terrorism? No, but there's blood sports and there's blood sports. Okay, if there's blood sports that's implicitly or explicitly calling for criminal behavior, that's one thing. So there are many degrees of blood sports. So there's an article by Ben Smith, the New York Times media columnist. He used to be the head of BuzzFeed, and as such, he had an employee named eventually Baked Alaska. My boomer dad is a highly educated, successful man. He voted Republican his entire life, supported Bernie Sanders. Yeah, Trump simply lost suburban voters. I think that's it. See, if you distract yourself with that which is false, such as voter fraud deciding the 2020 election, then it delays you coming to terms with what is true. What is true is that Trump lost the suburban vote. That was the deciding factor. And there's also been a very substantial swing during Trump's time in office against white identity. Like whites are less likely to be interested in white identity after the 4 years of Trump. He's made white identity increasingly toxic. So by getting obsessed with that which is false, fraudulent, you detach from reality, and it doesn't make you more effective, and it doesn't make you more happy. It just makes you like live in a fantasy world. It's crazy. So let's come to terms with like why Trump lost the suburban vote. So Ben Smith used to run BuzzFeed. Now he writes a column for the New York Times, and he wrote a column today about Baked Alaska. Used to be his employee. He talked about talking to former colleagues of Baked Alaska, what they remember about him. And essentially it seems to be that he would do anything to go viral, that he got hooked on the feelings of making content that went viral. So Baked Alaska was hired by BuzzFeed to oversee their content on Vine. Then he oversaw their Twitter account. And so apparently Baked Alaska struck his former colleagues. This is their analysis. And I think there's something to it, that someone who felt empty inside and he got filled up when he went viral. So someone who's healthy is not going to get filled up from going viral, because they're already full. It's just the cherry on top if you're a healthy person. But if you're an empty person, then going viral, getting that attention, is going to warp you. So you see this a lot, that people go online, get the attention that they've been yearning for, and then they live this whole alternate reality online. I mean, this happened to me to some degree. Right? In 1997, I started blogging. By 1998, I was famous, getting a ton of attention for my online activities, and probably fed a tendency in me to grandiosity, delusion, narcissism, and even some antisocial behavior. I had a therapist on and off between 1998 and I think 2010 who was concerned that I was verging on being a psychopath. So there's nothing inherently antisocial about going online. There's nothing inherently antisocial about making content online. There's nothing inherently antisocial about paying attention to social media. Right? So some people go online and it completely tosses them around and discombobulates them and leads to the creation of this toxic e-personality that then warps their real life. But if you're basically healthy, there's no inherent reason that going online and sharing your views online is going to destroy your life or destroy society. So what are some of the ways that one can tell whether what you're doing online is healthy or unhealthy? So I think if you're receiving a lot of negative repercussions in your real life for what you're doing online, then obviously your online activity is unhelpful to your well-being. If what you're doing online contradicts who you say you are or what you try to be in other areas of your life, in your real life, then that's going to hurt you. Okay, what mail-in ballot shenanigans? To the best of my knowledge, we don't have any evidence of mail-in ballot shenanigans. There's nothing inherently untrustworthy about mail-in ballots. We had 5 states that have exclusively done mail-in voting. So we have no evidence from those 5 states that exclusively do mail-in voting are shenanigans. Now, if by shenanigans you mean makes it easier for people to vote, and when you make it easier for people to vote, they're more likely to vote Democrat, then that should be a separate argument from voter fraud. What's happening, I think, is a conflation of increasing the ease of voting with voter fraud. Right? Making it easier for people to vote is not voter fraud. Well, Stacey Abrams in Georgia, I believe, pushed through legislation that made it when you mailed in a ballot and there was something technically wrong with the ballot that you mailed in, that you'd have the opportunity to fix it. So that's not voter fraud. That's operating by the law. That's operating by the legal system. So it used to be about 1% of mail-in ballots would be discarded because they failed to meet some technical requirements for mail-in ballots. Now, if legislation is passed or there are new procedures to give people, say, the opportunity to fix whatever mistakes they made with their mail-in ballots, then that's not voter fraud. Right? So let's say mail-in ballots become more common in the years ahead. That might increase the overall percentage of the population that votes, and the conventional wisdom is that increases the Democratic Party vote. That's not voter fraud, right? That's changing the ease with which people get to vote. That's not fraud. So making it easier for people to vote may well have had a significant role to play in the Democrats' success in 2020. But that's not fraud. That's a different problem. Or it's just a different challenge, a different circumstance that you probably have to adapt to rather than just blame or wail your teeth or gnash your teeth, wail and cry and gnash your teeth. That just may be the new reality, that voting becomes a lot easier. And that's making voting easier or giving people the opportunity to fix errors that they've made on their mail-in ballot. That's in and of itself not necessarily fraudulent. So I don't have a problem with Cumulus Radio telling hosts that they're not allowed to claim that the 2020 election was fraudulent. Because one, I believe that's factually correct. And two, the consequences of pushing the vote was fraudulent are just so dire. And incidentally, you think there should be whites-only country clubs, is there? I believe in free association, so I'm not sure that the big tech purge is primarily ideological. I'm not sure at all that what big tech is doing is primarily based on cracking down on conservatives. I think they're responding to legal incentives, that they could be legally held responsible for criminal behavior that is planned and pushed on their platforms. That's just a possibility, right? You watch this show, you know I'm not an expert on anything. I have a little bit of knowledge in a lot of different areas, but I'm not expert on anything. So so if it is true, let's just do the thought experiment. If it is true that the big tech crackdown is largely based on them rationally, legally making choices to reduce their exposure to liability for criminal behavior that's planned or promoted on their platforms, then if you want to change that, you have to change the legal and political incentives that big tech is dealing with. So it's a lot easier to scream and shout about crackdown on conservatives, but what if it's just big tech acting rationally and legally to protect themselves from liability for criminal behavior planned and executed and promoted on their platforms? So since the civil rights vote of 1965, we've essentially, as Christopher Caldwell knows, we've had a new constitution, civil rights constitution, which has superseded the original constitution. And so we no longer have the same rights to freedom of association, freedom to hire who we want, freedom to decide who we want to rent to, right? We have much less freedom of association, freedom of how we use our property, right? That's the result of legislation. And if you want to overturn big tech censorship, then maybe you have to change legally the incentives, legal incentives and legal liabilities that big tech faces for possibly criminal behavior planned on its platform. Yeah, we now have a terms of service constitution, right? So Donald Trump went up against big tech, and it looks right now like big tech won. Like it looks right now that Twitter in some ways is more powerful than Donald Trump. So if that's the reality, then it's good to accommodate yourself to reality, right? I'm not sure I'm necessarily thrilled with that reality, but we're not going to be able to change that overnight. So let's first understand what is the nature of reality. And then once we get clear about reality, yeah, I fought big tech and big tech won. Yeah, it may be, you've heard the old saying, you can't fight City Hall. Maybe right now you can't fight big tech. So let's just, for a thought experiment, say it's true. You can't fight big tech, right? Just like, let's say you're living in 15th century Europe. Perhaps you can't fight the church. Luke telling people what I've long advised, swallow the tech pill. Okay, so let's say you're living under a theocracy or you're living in Iran, all right? What's GTA mode? So if you're living under a theocracy, or whatever power you're living under, you have to either make peace with that power or become highly ineffective or miserable. Right? That's just the Grand Theft Auto. Right? That's just the nature of power. So if big tech has the power, then we have to perhaps accommodate ourselves to that reality. So if you're living under a theocracy, there are certain things you can't say out loud. Well, in every society, there are things you can't say out loud that are true, but without experiencing severely negative consequences. So that may be just the nature of reality. So let's say you're single and you're free, to martyr yourself essentially and to deplatform yourself to make some heroic gesture, and you don't care about the consequences. That's one thing. But if you've got a spouse and a family and people who care about you and a position in a community or a way of making a living that depends upon access to big tech, then that's reality. So what happens to people when they lose their college friends? They become homeless and talk to themselves. Okay, so live streaming is not inherently antisocial. If I say things on here that cost me my real life friends, then that would be an indicator, right, that this is antisocial for me. But my experience with live streaming is that, never said there's no evidence of voter fraud. Said I've yet to see evidence that there was sufficient voter fraud to determine the 2020 elections. There may indeed be such evidence, and I will be very open to looking at it and changing my mind if someone provides that kind of analysis. But I think it's entirely reasonable that an employer of people on radio stations say, hey, you can't tell lies, and here are some lies that you can't tell. And particularly when the social consequences are so toxic and the situation is so fraught. Government can't censor private companies, but private companies can censor the government. There's nothing in the Constitution about that. Great point, Brian. So, yeah, maybe we should just accept nature of power. You're not allowed to question the legitimacy of the US election unless you have evidence that the cheaters agree with. How will this live stream help to increase my Panessa? Okay, if you don't like the terms of service for your employer, then it's up to you to quit and get another job, right? Most jobs are somewhat onerous. There are just various degrees of suck. That's the nature of work. And that's the nature of reality. So what's the easiest way to make money? It's to get a job. That's the easiest way to make money. Right? It's a lot easier to make money getting a job than being an entrepreneur online. It's a lot easier making money getting a job than trying to live stream for a living. Work will set you free. Pushers of Russiagate pushed this election fraud notion for 3 solid years. Yes, they did. And they got away with it. So how are they able to get away with it? Like, what's the nature of power? Like, how are they able to play the game successfully where apparently the MAGA crowd has not been able to play the game successfully? So I don't have as much interest in what is ontologically fair as I do in what works. So if by your live streaming you antagonize your neighbors, antagonize your friends, antagonize your community, right, that's going to be antisocial. Yeah, because the MAGA crowd was led by a cow or grifter. Or maybe the MAGA crowd was simply led by someone who's not capable of making change, or maybe even he never had the ability to make this change. Perhaps it's possible that he never had the ability to win a war on big tech. And sometimes we don't have the ability to win certain wars in certain time periods. And so we can just accommodate ourselves the best we can to unpleasant reality, make the best of things. Because overall we have, well, our downsides. We have, usually you're likely to have better quality of life in many ways than most people in the world. It's powerful, and the man couldn't do anything to stop big tech censorship. Sure, bro. I don't know, could he? What could he do? What would have been more effective? Self-preservation is the highest moral virtue. No, It's not the highest moral virtue, but it's usually the highest moral virtue. So the alternative is self-immolation is the highest moral virtue. Right? Self-sacrifice is the highest moral virtue. All depends on the circumstance and the upshot. Like, what do you get for sacrificing yourself? And what do you get for keeping your gunpowder dry, so to speak, metaphorically, spiritual gunpowder? Like, we all have a choice about where we spend our time. Perhaps it's for the best that we spend less time on social media. Or perhaps we just need to change where we spend our time on social media or how we spend our time. So people love to make, one value the highest value that consistently in all circumstances outranks all other values. I just don't see the world that way. So I would say in most circumstances, self-preservation should be the highest value for the individual. But occasionally, there is a time for risking yourself. Luke Ford has managed to turn all the Beverly Hills into a broadcast studio amazingly. So some people want to say, truth is always the highest value. I disagree. Sometimes you lose and you have no power. There needn't be anything instructive about it. Oh, so sometimes you lose and there's absolutely nothing to learn from it, from Half Galatians' point of view. I don't believe that. I just don't see how it helps your happiness or your effectiveness, not to mention your parnasa, to not be in touch with reality. So Half Galatians is making the argument that that often there's just no upside to noticing the nature of reality. And I say that in general, you're best to notice reality and to take cognizance of reality. Parnasa is the key word. Parnasa, making a living, that's very important. It's not something that's trivial. It's not something that we should be afraid to talk about. It's not something that we should pose as being beyond that concern. Like, I'm such a morally righteous person, I don't care about parnasa. All right? That I am so spiritual, I don't care about making a living. I'm so dedicated to truth, I don't care about making a living. I am so dedicated to God, I don't care about making a living. I'm so dedicated to the pursuit of intellectual treasures, I don't care about making a living. To me, that's ludicrous. There are very few things in life more important than making a living. It's called being an adult, taking responsibility. Because if you don't care about making a living, you're putting yourself much more likely to be a dependent on others. I'm going to avoid the other team always has a say in the outcome. So I don't think we should try to pretend that we're above concerns about making a living. And I don't think we should take one moral value and pursue it to an extreme above all other moral values. All moral values are in tension with each other, right? There's a time for truth telling, and there's a time for keeping silent. In fact, there's even a time for telling lies, right? If your wife asks you, how do I look in this outfit? I don't have a strong opinion on this because I've never been married, but you maybe have to make a case that it may be best to tell some white lies and say, hey, you look fine, or you look great, right? You don't always have to tell the truth in every single circumstance. Yeah, lay that Ecclesiastes down. There's a time for truth-telling and a time to keep silent and a time for telling lies. Following Trump provides no value. Well, it's been a tremendous source of energy. All right? A lot of people have gotten a lot of energy, had a lot of fun. No, I don't think you follow Trump and you ruin your life. You ruin your life. Trump was just the excuse. For all those people who ruined their life with Donald Trump, Trump was just the excuse. They ruined their own lives. They made bad decisions. They made bad judgment calls. So the people who ruined their lives with Donald Trump, Trump was just the excuse. Trump was just the predicate for them to self-immolate, just as they had some kind of psychological need to. A wise person does not place his well-being in the hands of those who are completely careless. Some people will be ruined. No, some people will not be ruined just for supporting Trump. Some people will be ruined for the ways they supported Trump. All right, but there's a lot to be said for what you're saying too, Lip. So, where's the massage parlor? There are lots of them. I don't know if the numbers have decreased, but there are way too many massage parlors in this community. I'm trying to create, a holy community here. There's way too many massage parlors. But the way you go about supporting Donald Trump or anything else makes all the difference. You can do it in an obnoxious way, or you can do it in you can carry it lightly. Same with how you practice your religion. You can practice your religion in a way that's heavy and nasty. Or you can practice your religion in a way that's light and easygoing. So I have not visited any nefarious massage parlor ever. I have gotten a massage in Beverly Hills on several occasions. It was nothing nefarious. Very nice Chinese ladies. Gave me a very professional rub down. They did nothing wrong, bro. What did Rabbi Ruvain say about converts, bro? Okay, Rabbi Ruvain's an amusing. When they ask Luke if he wants to turn over, he says, no, thank you. Rabbi Ruvain's an amusing rabble-rouser. He's kind of low IQ content. I believe he's Sephardic, and I assume he's speaking largely to a lower IQ Sephardic crowd. All right, so the average Sephardic IQ is about 97. The average Mizrahi Jew IQ is about 92. The average Russian Jew IQ is about 67. And the average Ashkenazi IQ is about 110. So some rabbis speak to a lower IQ crowd than others. But if live streaming makes you happy, or participating in a YouTube chat makes you happy, and it doesn't have any negative consequences for your life, you're not doing anything wrong, bro. Like, being online is not inherently antisocial or bad for you. All right? If you're not losing any friends. Coffness, a couple blocks from me, there was a nefarious massage parlor. Police closed it, reopened as a OBGYN. When do crack dealers make parnassa in Beverly Hills, bro? We don't have crack dealers in Beverly Hills, bro. That's more incompetent. Like, people in Beverly Hills don't smoke crack. Come on, man. So Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz are suffering a lot of negative feedback, and for good reason, because they had no valid factual reason for challenging the legitimacy of the election, right? So if you push things that aren't true for political gain, okay, Trump seemingly pulled that off with the birther controversy against Barack Obama, where without any factual basis, he kept pushing the lie that Barack Obama was not born in the United States, and it seemed to help his standing. So sometimes you can use lies and they can advance your cause, but you then develop habits that may come back to bite you. And Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, is anyone surprised that as big tech and Dems push to crack down and punish Trump supporters, Luke has made it his mission to justify their actions? I haven't said anything to justify. I want to understand. The way I've conducted this live stream has always been to put a priority on trying to understand what's going on, making it clear that I don't have great expertise in the area, I'm more interested in the nature of reality than I am in making moral judgments about the nature of reality. Friend-enemy distinction. Is Luke the friend of those who supported Donald Trump? Tell you what I'm a friend of more than those who support Donald Trump. I'm a friend of that which is true. Okay, Laponius does not want to understand a degenerate like Jack Dorsey. Well, Jack Dorsey created a very influential platform, Twitter, and he just kicked the president of the United States off his platform. That's unprecedented. So I don't know anything that suggests that Jack Dorsey's a degenerate. He's an unusual guy. He's a left-wing guy. They don't care to understand us. Okay, so if other people don't care to understand you, should you try to understand them? Well, if it serves you. Nose ring. Yeah, that's weird. That is very weird. But it's probably much more normal in his social circle. Social media platforms don't want to be exposed to criminal liability, letting Trump use their platforms to attempt to overthrow the US government. Completely agree, Brian. I think that's what's primarily going on here. It's not primarily, it may, I don't know enough, may not be primarily an ideological purge. It may well be wanting to take prudent steps to limit their liability for the advocacy of illegal behavior. Okay, there's both liability in the strict legal sense, and there's liability in the sense of investors don't want to invest with you. Is Baked Alaska's life trajectory really that worse off than Luke's? I don't know. I have no idea. Baked Alaska has achieved, 100 things that I've never even come close to. So he has a gift for seeing that which is about to go viral. And on the other hand, he's got some troubles right now. So anyone read that New York Times article on Baked Alaska by Ben Smith, their media columnist? Kind of an interesting portrayal. I think a lot of people get intoxicated with going, they can be a loser and still be on a similar trajectory as Luke. Yeah, well, who knows what life will bring. But are there any signs about the trajectory that you're on in life? Okay, your bank account, that's a real sign of the trajectory that you're on in life. Is your debt increasing or decreasing? Are your savings increasing or decreasing? All right, that's one sign of trajectory. What about the quality of your relationships and your friendships? Are they decreasing or increasing? What about your sense of calm and your ability to weather adversity? Like when things don't go your way, do you freak out? Are you able to deal with it more calmly? That's a measure of adversity. Are you getting along with the people who are most important to you in life? Or are you having increasing conflicts with the people most important? Political cope is at peak levels. Stick says he doesn't care about YouTube anymore. So what are other signs of trajectory? I take this type of content more seriously as I see all these people making self-destructive life choices just as I did. Okay, so I don't think you can argue that the operator of the live stream has shied away from sharing his own self-destructive life choices, his own struggles, his own weaknesses and vulnerabilities. All right. You can make many valid and strong critiques of this live stream, but I don't think you can say, oh, Luke does this live stream as a self-righteous pompous above it all, just feels like he's better than everyone else. Trajectory is having a vision, working towards that goal in a consistent manner. Okay, I think trajectory is primarily measured by the quality of your relationships. I think it's probably even more important than than your bank account. Because if you have relationships, you can weather more difficult circumstances in life. You can do anything when you got friends, right? Particularly if they can get you a job. So I've never had the level of success that Baked has had. Okay, I've come close in some ways. Like I had a blog where I'd get 10,000, 15,000 viewers every day. But I do know from first-hand experience that fame won't fill the hole in your soul. I know from personal experience that promiscuity won't fill the hole in your soul. So what are the signs of the trajectory that one is on? I guess avoiding needless humiliation, right? If you're constantly getting humiliated, frequently getting humiliated, or there's an increase in the amount and severity you're getting humiliated, it's a really good telltale sign you're on a bad trajectory. Because humiliation is what results when you misjudge reality, get out of touch with reality, and you feel like you're more important than circumstances would truly render you as. So humiliation, I think, is an excellent sign of trajectory. Then learning from your humiliation, like what lessons do you learn? If your lessons that you learn are that problems are everyone else's fault, that's a sign you're on a bad trajectory. Embracing victimhood may very well be a winning political formula for a time, but it's absolute poison for individuals. Right, so never saw, Colonel Sanders was on a really bad trajectory until he turned it around, right, in his 70s, right? So this is the first time. Has there ever been any other right-wing criminal mob that beat up police? I'm trying to think. Priests take a vow of poverty. Yeah, they also take a vow of chastity. They don't reproduce. I don't exactly see what's meritorious about that. I don't see what's the problem either. I think it's fine for some people to take that on. I just don't see that as a life lesson or a message for anyone else. Like, why should other people should more people take on vows of chastity and poverty? I don't see that. But the only time you get humiliated is when you get out of touch with reality. If you don't have dependence and no prospects of having dependence, what is the point of making a living? Your own pleasure? Oh, how about personal responsibility? You're able to take care of yourself instead of depending on other people to take care of you. Do you believe in anything? You can support the causes that you believe in, or at least reduce the odds of you becoming a burden to those you care about. So I don't see what's meritorious about taking the attitude, oh, I don't care how much of a burden I am to other people. I don't care how much of a burden I'd be to my family or friends or my community. I'm just going to take a vow of poverty, right? Let's say you have no dependence. You can take the appropriate steps that you need to look after yourself. There's nothing wrong with taking good care of yourself. Taking good care, putting up savings in case of a medical emergency, saving for retirement. And you can also support the causes that are important to you. Right? You can give to your church, your synagogue, to the Sierra Club, whatever charities that are important to you, or you can help out. You may have a brother who's trying to raise 7 kids and is going through a tough time. You could help out your brother. Like, to take a vow of poverty is, in most cases, to say that, I want to flee from responsibility, and I don't care about looking after anyone else, right? I don't want to care for anyone else. I don't want to be there for anyone else. I just want to check out. Luke Ford, I think that persecution of Trump will be strictly limited to those who showed up. I have no idea, but I'm sure that the way that you support Trump will have a big effect on how much persecution. You can support Trump in an obnoxious or illegal way, or you can support Trump in a way that's funny or accessible to all sorts of different people. It's how you do things often more important than what you do. You do it with a smile, you do it in a kind, accessible way, you do it in a way that people can understand. You do it in a way that brings you closer to the people who matter to you, or do you do things in a way that separates you from those who matter to you? So it's not just what you do, it's how you do it. Do things with a smile, do things with kindness, do things with courtesy, do things in alignment with what is true and good and holy and pure.